Who here has heard of Miss Rachel? If you have children or grandchildren who are infants and toddlers, you have heard of Miss Rachel. I have a picture, if Evelyn will show it for us, and you can see what she looks like. She always has her signature pink headband and pink t-shirt, and she is a YouTube sensation for infants and toddlers. And the little girl in the other picture here on the right is Raha. She's a 3-year-old girl from Palestine, from Gaza. And you can't see it in the picture, but she is a double amputee. She has lost both her legs in the bombing in Gaza. And Miss Rachel has been using her platform to call attention to children like Raha. Thank you, Evelyn, for showing us those pictures. Now, Miss Rachel is actually Rachel Accurso, who has 2 master's degrees, one in music education and one in early childhood education. And in 2019, she discovered that her son was speech delayed. And so she began to look for resources to help her own child, and she could not find any. So she began to create them. And her husband would videotape her, and they started a YouTube channel called Songs for Littles, I think is what it's called. And in 2020, we had a pandemic, and suddenly all of these parents are home with their toddlers and infants. And they discovered Miss Rachel. And they found out she was not only entertaining, but she was educational. And so her popularity just boomed as all of these parents during the pandemic began to park their littles in front of Miss Rachel and let her teach them how to speak and how to sing. Now, she's become so popular, and she is such an advocate for children that she has begun to showcase the suffering of children around the world in every country, from the Congo and Sudan to Ukraine to Gaza to the United States. She is a spokesperson for children, and she is calling out to all of us to listen, to stop their suffering. And when I read our reading today, I thought, there is a woman in this reading who is just like Miss Rachel. She is crying out for her child who is suffering, and here is a healer right in front of her, and she is not going to stop crying out. Now, that woman has 3 strikes against her right off the bat, right? She's a foreigner, she's a Canaanite. She's a woman, and she's loud. And you know, people do not like loud women. If women would just be quiet and stay in their lane, everybody would have so much more peace, right? But this woman will not do that. She will continue to raise her voice, and the disciples get annoyed. Jesus, make her go away. Shut her up. She's irritating us, right? Then Jesus begins to have this conversation with her, and then she says something that just is so profound to him that he says, "Oh, you have great faith." And then he heals her daughter. And I skipped the part maybe where he insults her by calling her a dog, but that was all in the reading. I'm sure you heard that. So we're in Matthew chapter 15, and Jesus has been so very busy. He's been, feeding the 5,000 and walking on the water and healing people, and he's just doing all of this work. And then he gets to this place, which is kind of a liminal space. It's like if you go to the border between Canada and the United States, there's a space there, like in Niagara Falls, for example, where there's all different kinds of people. There's some Canadians, there's some United States citizens, there's some First Nations people, there's some people from other places in the world, and it's all this big mixture. And that's kind of the place where Jesus is in our reading. He's all the way north to what we now call Lebanon. He's outside of the territory of Israel. And there are a lot of different people around him. And he seems to not hear what this woman is saying. And I love this particular story because it's so hard to understand. I mean, Jesus looks bad. He calls this woman a dog. He insults her. He says, "I didn't come to help you. I only came to help these people, not those people." And it's a bad look for Jesus. So when I saw it coming up in the reading, I was super excited about that because I've been wanting to dig into this one for a while. And when I did, I found out there were there's 2 camps of thought about what's happening in this story. And then there's like a half a camp, okay? So you get to decide what you think fits this reading. Now, the first one is the progressive Christian view, which I subscribed to for a while. And in that view, people look at this text and they say, Jesus is fully God and fully human, and his humanity is showing. He was raised in a culture, and all of that racism and misogyny and xenophobia, it's all in there, and he says it, and it's terrible. And he has a conversation with this woman, and he changes his mind. So that sounded good to me, seemed correct for a while. Then I looked at the conservative camp, the other way of looking at this text, mostly coming from Catholic resources. And they say, no. Jesus is not that human, right? He's really fully God and fully human, and he's in contact with God the whole time, and he is listening for the Holy Spirit to direct him and what to do at every moment, and he's teaching his disciples something. If you go back just a few verses, Jesus has just explained to his disciples twice that it is not what you put into your mouth that defiles you. It's what comes back out of your mouth. It's your words that defile you. And so in this story, our conservative friends would say, Jesus is providing an object lesson. He's showing his disciples how ugly it really is when some of those words come out of our mouths so that they can hear themselves. And he uses this woman as an object lesson to do that. Now, I think there was one theologian or somebody wrote a commentary saying, we're sure that Jesus must have kind of winked and smiled at that woman, so she would know she's in on this charade. But that's not in the text. And it really bugs me that Jesus would use a woman who's hurting as an object lesson and call her a dog and tell her he's not going to help her. I mean, that just doesn't feel good either. So I really don't like either of our ideas on this text. Jesus just doesn't come out looking good in any of them. Then there's the half a camp. I don't want to spend a lot of time over here. This is the ultra-conservative fundamental reading of this text. The folks who read the Bible literally, and they say, well, Jesus is just telling the truth. Jesus did only come for the people of Israel, and, insert United States here, people who are faithful Christians. And he didn't come to save or help any of those people over there. And the only reason he helps this woman is she's the exception because she has faith. So you have to convert to our kind of Christianity, and then you're in the in-group, and Jesus will help you, save you, heal you, whatever you need. But if not, you are a dog. And we don't have to care about you. You're not our neighbor. You're excluded. Now, I would hope that that view is going away. At least I hope that until this past week when Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith, Indiana's Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith, preached a sermon in a church. And the title of the sermon was, How to Hate Properly. I'm not kidding. Look it up. How to Hate Properly. And I watched some of it. And in that sermon, he said, if there is love in the world, there's also hate. And if God loves something, he hates the opposite. And for example, God hates lying, and so we as good Christians, we have to also hate lying. It's very easy to change that a little bit and say we now hate liars, and we hate those people who have never converted to our way of being Christian. It is... I mean, is there a way to hate properly? I don't know. You'll have to listen to that sermon to find out. But it's very concerning to me that it can be used that way against people. And Ms. Rachel has been receiving a lot of hate. She has been boycotted. She has been called out on social media and in the news media as well. And she's been called anti-Semitic because she had a child from Gaza and didn't also have a child from Israel. She has been really picked apart by the white community. And all she has said about it is, I am an advocate for all children. All children. Doesn't matter where in the world they come from. Now, around July 4th, maybe you remember Nolan Wells, the young man who disappeared and whose body was later found. At that time, Ms. Rachel also posted just a question for us to think about. She said, "I wonder how the story would have played out differently if Nolan Wells had been a white teenager and all of his friends had been black." And that was all she said. And some of the news outlets just went after her. They said she was throwing gasoline on a fire. If she would just be quiet and stay in her lane, all this would just calm down and go away, right? And she answered back, "Black boys deserve to grow up." That was all she said. One news commentator said, "Who does she think she is? What qualifies her to be a political activist? She's a mom, you know, what else do you need?" Anybody can be a political activist, but they've been merciless to her. Now, some have said that she is kind of a modern-day Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. In 1969, Mr. Rogers filmed an episode that was iconic. He was sitting with his feet in a little kiddie wading pool, and his friend, the police officer who is a black man, came onto the set, and Mr. Rogers invited him to take off his shoes and put his feet in the pool with him. And there's this beautiful shot of 2 brown legs and 2 white legs in the kiddie pool at a time when most of the pools in the southern part of the United States were white only. He didn't even have to say anything. He just showed that image. And you know what it does? By the way, he did get criticized for that. But what it does is it lets people think a little differently. Maybe I can change my mind about racism. If Miss Rachel puts something on social media, maybe we can change our minds about these people or those people. They're just inviting us to change our minds. Maybe a little Canaanite girl deserves to be healed. Maybe she does. Maybe. Now, as I studied this text, I looked at the different ways of thinking about it. I didn't like any of them. None of it, Jesus just does not come out good in any of those 3 scenarios, I didn't think. And so I began to look at a couple of different concepts. One was the word dog, because that always has bugged me. If there's anybody here who's ever been called the B word, you know how hurtful that is. It's terrible. And in some of the articles I read about this text, that's the way the word that Jesus used would have been taken, as if this woman was a female dog. However, when I looked at the Greek, I found something different. The Greek word for dog is actually, you've got 2 choices. One is a rabid dog, a dog who is dangerous. And the other is a lap dog or a pet. And the word used in our reading today is the lap dog. It's the pet dog. Now, I was at the vet this past week with my 2 big dogs. And, I can barely control them. But other people had these cute little dogs that had bows in their hair, and they had little rhinestone necklaces, and they were buying dog food that looked more like people food, like better than my dinner was going to be. And one lady had a wagon, and she had all these little puppies playing with toys in the wagon, and one lady had a little baby she was feeding with a baby bottle, and I'm like, we really do sometimes treat our dogs better than we treat people. Now, if that's the picture that Jesus has in his mind when he is speaking to this woman, how does that change the reading for you? Now, there was one other thing I looked at that totally changed the reading for me. And that was, I went back through Matthew chapters 1 through 14. We're in 15, right? So we're well into Matthew's gospel. And I went back and I skimmed all those other chapters. And I found out that in all those chapters, Jesus is feeding people, he's healing people, he's healing girls, he's healing women, he's touching dead bodies and raising people from the dead, he's touching people who have leprosy, who are unclean for the Jewish people. He is casting demons out of 2 demoniacs. He is doing all of this work. And he never once said, oh, wait a minute, I can't do that for you because you're not part of my group. And then all of a sudden in chapter 15, it's like, what, did he bump his head and go, I forgot I'm supposed to be racist. I forgot to be misogynist. I forgot to be xenophobic. I totally forgot I'm only sent for the Presbyterians, and I'm not sent for everybody else. Can you believe he did that? Somehow that just doesn't sound right. So it left me in this place where nothing worked. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I had this little thought in the back of my head that said, maybe that's the point. Maybe we spend so much time trying to put Jesus in our little box so that we can understand what Jesus is like and what God is like, that we forget about the point. What was the point of the story, friends? There's a little girl who's suffering, and she needs to be healed. We are so busy trying to figure out, is Jesus on our side or is Jesus on their side? Are the disciples being obtuse and they need an object lesson? Is this woman being loud and annoying? What's happening? We're so focused on getting Jesus on our side that we miss the point. And that little girl, we don't know her name. We don't know what she looks like. We don't know how old she is. We don't know what any of her symptoms are. All we know is that she had a mother who would not stop, and that Jesus was moved by that. And I began to look at all of us in 2026 and how polarized everybody is. You know, we do this at our church, we do this at our church. We are Democrat, we are Republican, we are liberal and progressive, and we are traditional and conservative, and Jesus must be on our side. And we're going to make him fit into that box somehow. And in this story, Matthew has crafted this story that shows us a Jesus that fully resists being put into our little containers, who will not take sides until there's a child involved. A Jesus who cares about the least of these. I listened to a podcast yesterday, and in it the speaker said, someday, instead of having this top-down hierarchy of power in the world, our communities will be circles of outward-facing people, and in the center of each circle are the most vulnerable. Let that image sit for a minute. Someday, we're going to have a community that protects the most vulnerable. And we don't have it yet. So there is work to be done. So I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. What have you changed your mind about? I've changed my mind about almost everything, including this reading today. What have you changed your mind about? And how did that happen? Like, how long did it take? How many times did you have to be with someone from maybe a different country or a different skin color before you realized that they're just people like you? How long does it take to change your mind? One of my professors in college a long time ago said, our minds are like dirty diapers. Sometimes they just gotta be changed. And then lastly, what is the story about? It's about a child who needed healing. And so what child needs you today?